In this video, I want to talk about the topic of representation in literature. How do you represent someone the right way, especially if they belong to a minority? I don't actually have an answer for that, but I want to cover the topic anyway, because it's important and I clearly don't know my own boundaries, and I'm gonna talk about this even though I'm probably gonna get a lot of flag for it, so yay. Even if there's no final true solution, it's something that people should at least reflect on when they write, even if they, like me, have no freaking clue about what to do with it. In order to discuss the issue of representation, I'm going to discuss the Harry Potter series, specifically Dumbledore. So, let me get one thing very clear right now, before you all go down in the comment section. Dumbledore is an awesome character. I absolutely love him. The comments I'm going to be making in this video revolves only around the matter of representing sexuality, and nothing else. Me discussing this does not mean that I think Dumbledore is a bad character or that Rowling is some sort of homophobe. She isn't. Obviously, she's not. I'm not gonna say that. Okay? My focus is squarely on representation, specifically in literature, even more specifically in the Harry Potter series, on how a character in a book can be a representation of a minority, or maybe not be a representation. I'm coming at this from a sort of academic point, like if you were to write an analysis of an exam paper or something like that. In this video, I'll be discussing representation through the lens of dualism. How something is always viewed in relation to another and is understood through this relation. Yes, I'm simplifying things a bit, but if I had to explain this in detail, we'd be here all day, so, you know. On to the analysis. When Rowling declared that Dumbledore is gay, I was happy, like most readers. It was great to find out that such a great character wasn't straight. But I wasn't only glad. I also became a bit annoyed, for lack of a better word. Not because Dumbledore was gay, but because of the way that he was outed. In order to explain, let's briefly turn to some theory about gender and ethnicity. According to philosopher Simone de Beauvoir, there has in Western history been a tendency to view women as an other, as something strange and different. She quotes Aristotle, who said, "The female is a female by virtue of a certain lack of qualities," and St. Thomas, who said that women are imperfect men. In the same manner, de Beauvoir points to the creation of Eve as being made from a man. This idea speaks to a worldview where women are secondary and men are the default. It is normal to be a man. Women are what you have when you don't have a man. They are the other. As de Beauvoir says, humanity is male. We see this in the use of man not only as a description of a biological sex, but also as a term used to refer to a human, which even in itself has man in it, just like woman does. If you're still here and haven't rage quit my analysis yet, let me just say this. I'm not trying to make guys feel bad, okay? I'm simply explaining a theory that I want to use for the analysis. The point of this video is not to create some angry debate about gender, sex, race, sexuality, or anything like that. I just want to talk about something that I find interesting and feel need to talk about, even if it's a subject that'll probably piss a lot of people off for different reasons. Anyway, according to de Beauvoir and others like Edward Said, Western society has a very clear dualism between a so-called subject and an other. De Beauvoir talks about it in terms of the sexes. Man is the subject with a will and the ability to act. Woman is the other, the one that is acted upon and is the deviation of the man. Said, on the other hand, talks about dualism in regard to Western literature that tries to portray the East. Easterners are others, the Westerners are subjects. This is portrayed through Orientalism and colonialism, where the West acts upon the East by making colonies there, and this is then reflected in the way the West represents the East in literature. There they become the other. They are still, even in text, being acted upon and become what Westerners want them to be in order to describe themselves. By describing someone else, you also in turn describe your group. They are evil, so we are good. They are savages, so we are civilized. I don't want to dive into too much detail on these theories, but suffice to say that this dualism can rear its head in many forms. If we view the matter of sexuality through the dualism lens that Said and Beauvoir brings up, then that would mean that heterosexuality is the subject and homosexuality is the other. Heterosexuality is usually viewed as the default setting of a human. You don't have to tell your parents that you're straight, because that's the assumption from the beginning. Instead, you tell your parents about it when you're homosexual, or another kind of sexual for that matter. Homosexuality is considered a deviation, something that is not within the norm. It is not heterosexuality, so it is the other, something that is not the default. That's a problem for tons of reasons, obviously, but my focus here is on how this affects representation of homosexuality. How do you go about representing the other, the homosexual, in literature? Again, just to be clear, I like the Harry Potter series. Love it is probably a better word, actually. It's a great series that all children and teens should at least try to read. It has great morals and teachings, so I'm not doing this analysis to bitch about Rowling or try to tear her work apart, okay? Okay? Just before I go down into the comment section, just know that I like Rowling. I like the Harry Potter series. Just know this before you go down to angrily comment. Okay, so let's talk about Dumbledore, whom I like, remember. Rowling announced that Dumbledore was gay after the books were done. If you read the books, you probably won't find any real hints of this. From what I understand of this matter, Rowling didn't bring up Dumbledore's sexuality because it wasn't relevant to the story. And that's true. There's no reason for a headmaster to discuss his sexuality with his students, and he's an old man who probably isn't that active in that part of his life anymore. His sexuality also doesn't matter to the overall plot of the story, so there's no need to bring it up in that regard. In this sense, Dumbledore is a refreshing representation of the other. So often homosexual characters are all about their sexuality. Their problems are about how to tell their parents and friends about it, or about finding someone to love, or about the hate crimes that one might encounter. Their personalities can end up being centered around how different and unique they are because they are the other, and how they see the world in a totally different way. And in some cases, they're just stereotypes who are meshed into the story to be the butch lesbian or sassy gay friend. Dumbledore doesn't fall into these traps. He is for sure his own character, and is viewed as a teacher, headmaster, wizard, and father figure first and foremost. In that sense, it's great to see a character that is gay, but where the sexuality isn't in any way the focus or his purpose within the story. And this is where I say however. So, brace yourself. However, his lack of sexuality could also kind of be an issue when we're talking about representation. Because the thing is that this dualism issue, that's still a thing, even when we read. So if the reader is presented with a white, old, strong wizard, they're going to assume that he's straight, which he isn't. But the default is straight. So when a Twitter user writes this to Rowling, I wonder why you said that Dumbledore is a gay because I can't see him that way. And Rowling replies, maybe because gay people just look like people. Then, I mean, yeah, of course she's right, but she also seems unaware of the fact that people will assume Dumbledore is straight if she doesn't write into the story that he isn't. Of course also that Twitter user might just be a homophobe, but who knows. Anyway, Rowling unfortunately is the one responsible for people not seeing him in the correct manner. You might say that it doesn't matter. Dumbledore's sexuality isn't relevant after all. And why do I even care so much? Do I want him to go out and make out with some dude just so people will know for sure that he's gay and totally not straight? What would the point of that be to the story? And yeah, you're absolutely right. The story isn't about Dumbledore. His sexuality isn't relevant. But again, however, another Twitter user once wrote to Rowling, "It's safe to assume that Hogwarts had a variety of people, and I like to think it's a safe place for LGBT students." And Rowling answers, "But of course." Because of course you would. It makes sense to be supportive of this issue. But we never see this in the books. Let's take the Goblet of Fire, the Phoenix Order, and the Half-Blood Prince. Here the characters are at a time in their lives where some will be starting to maybe figure out that they are not straight. But we never see a single student express anything like that. What about the Yule Ball? We don't hear about two guys or girls dancing together. We don't hear anyone lamenting that they want to invite someone of the same sex to the ball, but that they don't have the nerve to do it, or worse, aren't allowed to do it, because again, if it's so okay, then why were there no same-sex couples at the Yule Ball? Here's the thing. It's great that Rowling goes out and says these things, that she lets us know that it's okay to be gay at Hogwarts, and that one of the greatest wizards ever is gay. But that's all stuff that she said after the books had been published. All the books show are heterosexual couples. Hell, the idyllic epilogue shows our main characters grown up, married to someone of a different gender, and with kids. And that's why the books could be viewed as problematic in regard to representation. Rowling talks about sexuality, but she never showed any of it in her book. Thus, you just assumed when you read it that all the characters were straight because, again, that's the default. Unless something else is pointed out, one assumes the default is the answer. She claims that Hogwarts is pro-LGBT, but that's never actually seen in the books, and that can make it look like this was all just an afterthought. That Rowling just made Dumbledore gay after having written the books, because she realized that a lot of people were wondering if there were any gay characters in the books. And then Dumbledore becomes a token character. Oh right, I need someone to be gay. Dumbledore, you're gay now. Gesture from the author. Is this the case? Did Rowling just make him gay after the books were done? Who knows? We'll never know for certain because there weren't any references or allusions to this issue in the series. There's no way to know if Dumbledore was always meant to be gay, or if this was all an afterthought to Rowling. An attempt at making things more diverse after already finishing the series. So sure, homosexuals had a representation in the book, according to Rowling, but it was a hidden one. Is that a good or bad thing? Well, a bit of both, I guess. It's good to see a homosexual character that doesn't revolve around being homosexual, but it's also bad because in the end, he was then assumed to be straight by most readers. Thus, he did not actually represent anything else but the default. He wasn't really a representation until Rowling made everyone aware of his sexuality. This is why this topic can be hard to discuss. You want to represent the other, but you also want to let them be their own character. You don't want them to be defined by their otherness, but if you don't even mention the otherness, then the character will end up being read as a default, and thus lose some of what made them into the character that they are. It's a fine line to walk, but if you're someone who likes to write, I think it's worth a thought every now and then. How would you portray the other? How do you walk that tightrope without giving way too much or way too little information about your character? It's a hard question to answer, but at least you should try to think about it. If you're an author, representation might not be the thing that you're thinking about when you're writing a character that isn't straight or isn't white or whatever. And that's okay, because, you want your character to be a character and not to be some sort of token thing that you just put in there. But at the same time, you should also keep in mind that whether you write this person as a representation or not, they are going to be taken as a representation. every single character that one reads about becomes a representation of something and someone. So you have to deal with the fact that that's what's gonna happen, and you should at least take that into account and find some sort of balance that you think work. And again, I don't hate Rowling, Dumbledore, or the Harry Potter series, so, please don't kill me. I just thought I'd mention this because a lot of people, they heard Rowling say that Dumbledore was gay, and they took it at face value and was like, yeah, sure, okay, he's gay, this is great, this is awesome. But no one ever questions the fact that there's not really any LGBT representation in the book. There's not any single character ever who's actually mentioned to be homosexual or another kind of sexual. So claiming those books to be, in any way a good representation of LGBT, that's just not true. And that's not to say that the books are bad, but, going out after the books had been published and saying all these things, that doesn't, take anything away from the fact that this was lacking in the books, that it wasn't there in the books. You can't go out after you already wrote the books and then say, oh yeah, all those things, they were there, you just didn't see them. Then how does that change anything? Like, you say that Hogwarts is an LGBT-friendly place, yet you never showed it. It sure didn't seem like it was, because there were no one who seemed comfortable enough, apparently, to act out their sexualities. Like, you didn't see any homosexual couples there. And that makes it seem like it wasn't that friendly of a place for an LGBT person. So, yeah. Just, remember when you leave your possibly angry comment about this, that I do like the series. I just wanted to talk about this one issue. So, yeah. You have fun now.